Candace. Go ahead.
Okay, so that's the question at hand. Ken invited me here today, and that's why I asked him what this room to talk about, because I'm not necessarily a big talker, but the question that he asked me to answer was, why do I dance? And it was an interesting question, even though it sounds simple, but if you asked me this maybe 5 years ago, I'd have been like, I just like it. But especially in the last 5 years, I've sort of figured out, how much it means to me and how much it affects the people around me in the wider society. So I'll start like the basic things. Why do I dance? My mother put me in dance school when I was 6. She had a great affinity for dance, but when she was growing up, they couldn't afford to send her, they couldn't afford the time. My grandmother was a single parent, all of the above, right? But I was her first daughter. She's like, she's gonna be a dancer. Put me in dance class. So dance has always been a part of my life for as long as I've known. And I've realized also that I dance for, there are personal reasons that I dance for, and then there are also reasons that sort of serve the public good, for want of a better word, right? On a personal level, dance has definitely made me a better person, right? I was, a scrawny little child running around, no coordination, I was very, reserved, shy, not confident, and dance taught me a lot of skills and a lot about myself. I have written down outgoing, fearless, confident, self-assured, connected, constantly challenged, humble, accountable, and honest. And these things have all led to the person that I am today because of me staying involved in a certain discipline for a certain length of time. And now, especially living in New York, away from the place that I'm from, it turned into a way for me to stay connected to where the place that I'm from, my identity, how I identify as Trinidadian, right? So especially with my work with soca dance, it was a way for me to be a part of the representation of my culture, right? Because teaching soca, I am sort of at the forefront. Like, people now look to me in terms of things about Carnival, about Caribbean, about Trinidad, because I'm sort of out there, doing the thing that is Trinidadian. And to be on the inside of what's happening, especially, again, living abroad, it's like you're constantly seeking sort of validation or reaffirmation of who you are, who you think you are, the things that matter to you. And so now, being a practitioner of soca, I'm sort of on the inside of what's happening as opposed to looking. And then also, deepening my connection to who I am. But before I get into soca, the thing that I was trained in was ballet and modern, right? So I grew up going to that ballet school. I didn't grow up doing, best village community dance and the community center, even though I lived 2 steps away from one, right? Grew up doing ballet and modern, and then when I went to university, the same thing. My school is very, sort of classical based, so ballet, modern, and when I graduated, that's sort of the kind of work that I ended up doing, working in contemporary modern companies. So I worked with a woman named Crystal Brown in Spirit, a dance company, and then I went on to work with Michaela Thomas, who's Trinidadian but does contemporary work. Who else have I worked with? I work with a company now called Sydney Movie Dances that does we do contemporary dance but at the intersection of social justice. So, and there are other companies that I'll tell you more about that later. But that was where most of my training and practice was, right, in contemporary dance. So I was pointing my toes, leaping into the air, rolling on the floor, that kind of thing. It didn't really have much to do with, being West Indian. However, that's a very big important part of my life because that's what I grew up training, right? But as the years went by, especially with my work with LaShawn Prescott, I came back to Trinidad in 2008 and I ended up dancing for Marshall Montano for a while. And then I came back in 2011 and did another thing while still pursuing my contemporary dance career. And then recently, teaching soca classes with LaShawn, it sort of led me back to why it is I really do this because, as a dancer, especially in New York, probably here too, you are constantly straddling the world of I need parents. But I want to do this thing, I want to dance, and there's a battle because, on a certain level being a dancer form is a selfish career. I kept having when we hear that beat, like, how do we express that? How does it come out in your body? Is whining, yes, but there are other things that we do too, right? It's tripping, it's that constant beat that we always emphasize, even if it's with your torso or your hips or your legs, just by stepping on the spot, chipping. So things, stuff like that I kept analyzing. Allow people to be their happiest and strip the fear that is attached to expressing unfiltered joy. So that's not necessarily something that I would say an issue here, because we grew up being allowed to express that joy. But in away outside of Carnival, Trinidad, West Indies, that isn't something I feel that is openly done. There's this sort of people can show when they're angry openly. People can show when they're upset, when they're sad. Well, sad to some extent, but pure happiness as you experience it is before, because when you smile, your face cringes up, you have lines, nobody wants to show that side of themselves. They feel, it's sort of like shameful, or it's a weird thing when people don't like to show that they're happy. It's strange. I found this from teaching the class. So, and because of that, I found that I have to be honest with who I was as a happy person, right? When I teach the class, if I show any sense of discomfort or self-consciousness, then it ripples throughout the class. And I've had classes where I'm like, why is this so weird? What is going on today? And it's me. That's the problem. So I've realized that I needed to strip down my filters to allow the class to strip down theirs. And then the last thing I have is choreograph rhythm, because that's basically what it is, right? So I lead a warm-up, we go across the floor, we wave flags, all kind of things, and then we do a dance. And to me, that sort of like brings together a lot of the elements of Carnival, because like when you're crossing the stage and you have your costume, right? Like when you cross the stage, especially now, it's not so much about the clothes you're wearing, because right now the clothes you're wearing look like anything else, right? But you are expressing your best self, your best whine, your best joke, your best jump. You are your fullest moment on the stage for Carnival. So that's, in me putting together choreography, that's sort of what I try to get at. Because you've been dancing the whole class, there's no difference really. But the fact that you have to learn something and then present it to your friends sort of brings that performance aspect into the class. So let me show you one of the routines from class. Class that I teach in New York, so it's every Saturday at the school in Brooklyn. And as you can see, there's a wide cross-section of people that come, right? So there are random housewives from Brooklyn who come, Caribbean people who want to get some soca days, dancers come. I don't know, people who are like 70 years old who come to my class. Yeah, there's a wide percentage. 70? 70. There's a lady comes. Yes, and she's there waving her flag. So.
Actually, it has limitations to that.
Exactly. But that's one of the things that I really try to push for the class. It's like the class is for everyone. If you can step one foot in front of the other, you can do the class. You know what I mean? So, yeah, you don't need dance experience, even though people get weird when they see the video. They're like, oh, I can never do that. I'm like, yes, you can. I promise you. You may not be able to look like me, but you can look like you doing it, and that's the whole point. So, yeah. Let's see. So next now. So that's like my work with soca. I recently started choreographing in the contemporary dance genre. And so my own work within contemporary dance is sort of a fusion of what I've been investigating with soca and with the contemporary work that I've already done. So my aim is so the name of my solo company so far, because so far it's just me that performs. It's called Contemporary. So my aim to the company is to fuse soca / carnival / Caribbean aesthetic with contemporary dance movements, to place the Caribbean aesthetic on concert dance stages and concert dance spaces, and to create conversation around contemporary Caribbean identity. So, for a long time, I've been dancing with all these different contemporary and modern Afrofusion companies. And I felt that I wanted to see more of myself in a concert dance setting. So you're thinking about like Queen's Hall, those kinds of spaces in New York. And I wanted to be able to do the things that, I enjoy doing, which is whining and jumping up. But with, some of the performance aspects of contemporary dance. So the work that I've done so far is a solo called Of Circles and Bright Colors that is supposed to be about one woman's sort of attachment to Caribbean type movement and its implications for, I guess, how she identifies herself. So I'll show you that now. I think it's finished. Yes, it is. Okay, great. You could say what you saw in it, but.
Okay, it's really the question was asked. But to me, what I'm saying, I could be wrong, so wrong. But I feel like it was a fusion of contemporary as well as soca movement, everything. There's a fusion of different cultures in there. There's sort of kind of movement, contemporary movement. So as soca when it was like,
right.
So I was wondering if I'm correct. It's a fusion of
you are
poetry.
Yes. And one of the things that I figured out, because this piece started because it was sort of on a whim. I decided to do this choreography workshop, and I just put together these 3 phrases that I had done before, and I was like, okay, I'll just make a piece. And then I got into the studio and I started, these things that come naturally to me. And I was like, okay, I guess this is going to be a piece now. But then what also came into the piece too was this sort of like, spiritual Baptist release kind of thing that came out of nowhere. I mean, I didn't, necessarily identify with that, but it sort of came out when I started moving and when I started doing the things that I found pleasure, right? So yeah, so it's like a mixture of, and it sort of reminded me of, the lineage of this type of movement, like where it comes from and the implications in other parts of our lives, right? Because soca is one thing, but people also find that same sort of release and joy from being in the Orisha, and that sort of release from being possessed by a spirit or whatever. So it's like that sort of I don't know, trajectory of movement, of feeling, of inspiration. That sort of comes out in the piece too. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I was listening to the music. It sounded very slow and sort of ritualistic, sort of symbolic. I saw a little bit of the Caribbean, but not much. I saw you spin a bit, sort of a ballet style. See a little poise and grace and all of that. So there's a whole lot of stuff inside of there, really. Not just 1 or 2 elements. The whole.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like being West Indian, a lot of things just are in that sort of come out. But the oriental thing you probably hear is the guitar.
Okay. And a chime round.
That's a snare drum actually.
Oh,
yeah. The two, so I collaborated with a friend of mine. Like, I wasn't in charge of music at all, really. The piece was, and the music was a friend of mine. The guy who's playing the snare drum is also, he's Trinidadian, but he's going to NYU to do his master's in music. And I just told him about the idea. He came to rehearsal once or twice, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to compose something for 2 other instruments." I said, "Okay, great." And probably the day that we shot this, we had rehearsed, I think we rehearsed 1 hour before I had to show it. But I just sort of explained to him what the piece was about, and he did his own take on it.